So today we're going to be discussing outcome measures. The three that we're going to be discussing is the PDQ-8, the 9-hole peg test, the sit-to-stand 5 repetitions. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview for each outcome measure, discussing the methodology, reliability, validity, target populations, clinical application, and limitations of each outcome measure. So the first one we're going to talk about is the PDQ-8. This is a self-reported outcome measure that is used to assess the quality of life in individuals with Parkinson's disease. This is an 8-question survey about mobility, the ADLs, emotional well-being, stigma, social support, cognition, communication, and bodily discomfort. These questions are scored from 0 to 4, so 0 being never, 1 occasionally, 2 sometimes, 3 often, and 4 is either always or cannot do it all. So the questions in the survey are, due to having Parkinson's disease, how often during the last month have you had difficulty getting around in public, had difficulty dressing yourself, felt depressed, had problems with your close relationships, had problems with your concentration when reading or watching TV, felt unable to communicate with people properly, had painful muscle cramps or spasms, or felt embarrassed in public due to having Parkinson's disease. And again, these questions are scored 0 to 4. So the reliability for this has been shown to be adequate, whereas the validity is excellent. And the MCID for this questionnaire depends on whether the individual is progressing or worsening. If they are progressing, it is a 5.9, and if they're worsening, it's 4.9. And this can even be broken down further depending on the severity of the Parkinson's disease. So if that's known, the MCID can be more accurately applied to those individuals, whether it's mild, moderate, or severe Parkinson's. Some of the limitations of this outcome measure is that it's a limited assessment. So this is actually a shortened version of the PDQ 39. So it only covers 8 of the 39 questions that were originally made in the full version. Another thing is that it lacks cognitive and non-motor symptoms. So Parkinson's, in addition to the motor symptoms, has a lot of non-motor symptoms, and those non-motor symptoms need to be addressed when treating. So this could definitely impact the treatment and how the course of the Parkinson's takes place. Another thing is the cultural and language limitations. So sometimes the questionnaire may not be able to be translated directly over to a certain language, and certain cultures may not do or perceive certain tasks the same way as us. So this might impact the way they score this exam. Also, there's self-reporting bias. So this is not really an objective measure where the individual is doing something, rather they're just filling out a questionnaire. So this could lead to over-reporting or under-reporting depending on how the individual perceives their disease or their condition at the current time. And then it also has a limited ability to guide treatment. So it doesn't really talk too much about specific motor symptoms like tremor, rigidity, which are 2 big things in Parkinson's. So it doesn't really give the therapist an idea of what they need to treat. So their treatment might not be as accurate as it needs to be. Moving on to the 9-hole peg test. This is used to assess finger dexterity and upper extremity function in patients with various neurological conditions, such as stroke, TBI, Parkinson's, MS, and even pediatric disorders. This test you can see on the bottom right. So the patient is going to take the pegs one by one, and they're going to place them into the holes on the side. They're going to use only one hand when doing this activity. After all the pegs have been placed into each hole, the individual is going to use that same hand and return every peg into the well. The time starts as soon as the patient touches the first peg, and the time stops when the last peg is returned back to the container. So a video of this.
The 9-hole.
You can see it here.
Peg at a time. Okay, ready, go. Another helpful hint is to put some Dicem under the board so that it doesn't slide on the table. If someone does knock out a peg that's already been in, then let them keep going, and while they're doing it, you can put it back in. And then take them out as quickly as you can. If they knock them out of the well while they're working, you pick them up and put them in. Good. So that the 9-hole.
And now, what's the reliability for this test? So it turns out individuals who've been diagnosed with either CVA or MS, it was deemed to be excellent, while individuals who were diagnosed with Parkinson's, it's anywhere from adequate to excellent. And the validity for individuals with CVA, it's either anywhere from adequate to excellent. And for MS, it's adequate. And for any healthy adult, it could be anywhere from adequate to also excellent. And like any test, it has its limitations. So what are limitations for this one? It mainly focuses on speed as the primary outcome, which potentially can overlook other important components like precision, control, or even like the effort they're putting into this test. It isolates the hand for testing fine motor skills, but it doesn't assess other aspects of the upper limb function, such as things like the shoulder, the elbow mobility, which are often impacted with some neurological conditions. And in real life scenario, manual dexterity is rarely tested in isolation like how it is in this test. Most tasks require coordination between different body parts, often involving multiple steps like force or just like speed. And now we'll move on to the sit to stand 5 repetition test. So what this test is used for is to assess the functional lower limb strength, transitional movements, and also dynamic balance, along with fall risk in older adults and patients with either dementia, a stroke, a vestibular disorder, balancing disorders, or even like fall histories. So how is it done? So the patient is going to sit in a standing chair with their arms folded across their chest and their back against the chair. They're going to stand up and sit down 5 times as quickly as possible without touching the back of their chair. So they shouldn't really try to just like plop onto the chair, should always be controlled. And the timer should start when the examiner says start and should stop when the individual touches the seat after their last rep.
And here is a video demonstration of it.
Sits with arms folded across chest and their backs against the chair. Use a standard chair, 43 to 45 centimeters, that is not secured against a wall. Stand fully and don't touch the back of the chair between repetitions. Timing begins at go and ends when the individual's buttocks touch the chair on the 5th repetition. The individual begins from the starting position, sitting in the middle of the chair, back straight, arms crossed over chest, and feet flat on the floor. Tell the individual, I want you to stand up and sit down 5 times as quickly as you can when I say go. Do you have any questions? Tell the individual to stand fully between repetitions and not to touch the back of the chair. Timing begins at go and ends when the individual's buttocks touch the chair on the 5th repetition.
And now what's the reliability for this? So it turns out to be excellent for retest reliability in healthy adults, which makes sense. The patient's objectively doing everything and we're just assessing. The validity, it's excellent when assessing dynamic balance and functional mobility in older adults compared to the time up and go test. The MCID, it should be greater or equal to 2.3 seconds. And for the fall risk scoring, for healthy, elderly, or even individual with a CVA, anything greater than 12 seconds will indicate a higher fall risk. And patients with Parkinson's, anything greater than 16 seconds will indicate a fall risk. And finally, what's the limitations for this one? So it doesn't really assess other important movements like walking or turning, which are also crucial for our safety and our mobility. It kind of just tests them in the sagittal plane movement. And the test only looks at static balance. So like statically when they're sitting down and when they're kind of standing up for that brief second. It doesn't really assess dynamic posture control, which are required for many other functional activities. And finally, the test only measures the time complete for the sit to stand transition, but doesn't really provide any information about the patient's control once they're standing. For individuals with conditions like vestibular disorders or even like a balance dysfunction, maintaining stability after standing up is a crucial part of their functional mobility. And here are our references.